Hello, friends. So today I'll be talking on this topic, deciding drug dosing in critical illness. So this is a very dry topic, so I should confess it is an extremely important topic. But to for the trainees to go through this topic, read about it, assimilate it, it can be a very arduous sort of a task because it's quite daunting to go through this whole topic and try to understand the core concepts. I've tried to simplify this whole topic and to my best of my ability. So I'll just take you through the topics that I would be covering. So the topics I would be covering is pharmacokinetics, where we would be talking very briefly on volume of distribution, total body concentration, and half-life of the drug, and practical applications. So briefly about pharmacodynamics and biophase, dose response. And this is a very important aspect of this whole topic, PKPD changes. So what are the pharmacokinetic and pharmacodynamic changes that happens in various critical ills? So this particular aspect of the narrative would be very important. Although it's a very dry topic, this topic becomes terribly important in the day-to-day practice to have some clarity as to how the drug levels get affected with the internal milieu that changes within the body due to various pathological conditions. So we would talk about how this pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics get affected in critical illness, circulatory shock, liver failure, and SIRS and sepsis, so which typically we see in intensive care. And this is also an important aspect, antibiotic dosing. So what are the factors that affect the dosing? So briefly about drug monitoring, sedatives, analgesics, and relaxants, summary and take-home message. So these are some of the broad outline that I would be covering in next half an hour. So when we talk about pharmacokinetics, what do we understand? So it basically deals with whenever a drug is administered either orally, intravenously, or intramuscularly. So there is an absorption of the drug that happens. Post-absorption, there is distribution of the drug that happens to the various sites. And after that, metabolism of this drug has to happen, and this drug has to be eliminated. So these are the four aspects that tends to happen when a drug intake happens, and each one of it is determined by various factors, and this is what we call as pharmacokinetics. And in this pharmacokinetics, there are three different domains which really influence this. One is the volume of distribution of the drug. So the volume in which the drug gets distributed. Then there is a total body concentration, and after the volume, after the distribution in a particular volume, what is the concentration that is attained, and the half-life of the drug. So we'll talk about very briefly on this. So what do we understand by volume of distribution? So when a drug is taken inside the body, so it gets dispersed and gets distributed in the whole volume that the body constitutes. And this volume of distribution is determined by amount of drug that reaches the target site divided by the concentration of the drug at the afferent arteriole. So, and the volume of distribution typically determines the loading dose of the drug, which is calculated by the volume of distribution multiplied by the concentration of the drug. And there is an entity called steady state volume, where larger volume, which reflects the larger volume after drug distribution throughout the body. And the rate of drug administration is related to the rate of drug elimination. So these are some of the uh, points that we need to understand when we talk about volume of distribution. So volume of distribution is simply the amount of drug that attains certain levels in the target organ divided by the concentration of the drug. So then we'll talk about clearance of the drug. So as we did discuss, when the drug is taken in, so it has to be eliminated or cleared. So there are different organs that get involved in clearance of the drug. Obviously, one is the liver, one is the kidney. So in the liver, so there are different mechanisms that happen. So there is once a drug is taken in, so there is induction of the enzymes that happen or inhibition of the enzymes, and there is a protein binding of the drug that happens. And the changes in the hepatic blood flow has a great bearing on the clearance of the drugs. So there is this zero order kinetics and the first order kinetics that typically happens in the liver, which influences the clearance of the drug. So the first order kinetics, what it simply means is the amount of drug that reaches the liver is directly proportional or related to the amount of drug that gets eventually eliminated from the liver. Then there is a zero order kinetic. So there are certain drugs which exhibit this zero order kinetics, typically alcohol, ethyl alcohol, barbiturates, and phenytoin. So basically, these drugs get eliminated at a particular fixed rate, which we call it as zero order kinetics. And the first order kinetics is calculated by steady state concentration multiplied by total body concentration. So that is about, in brief, about clearance. So we spoke about volume of distribution, clearance of the drug. Then we'll talk about half-life. So what do we mean by half-life? So when a drug is administered into a body, so the time taken for this particular drug to reach the half of its concentration is called as half-life. And there are three different types of half-life. One is the distribution half-life, which is T half alpha, which basically denotes rapid reduction of the drug. Then there is something called elimination half-life, which is called T half beta, where which indicates the slow elimination of the drug. So in distribution, there is rapid reduction of the drug. In elimination half-life, there is a slow reduction in the drug. Then there is terminal half-life called T half gamma, which basically denotes slow redistribution of the drug within the body. So elimination half-life sometimes may not be pertinent or relevant to certain drugs like propofol, and its role gets limited in these, where any drug which undergoes redistribution within the body, this elimination half-life becomes a bit of a misnomer, and this becomes, its role becomes limited in certain drugs. And a typical example is propofol, where there is extensive redistribution of the drug. So the relevance of this whole drug concentration is the concentration that we attain is what really determines the observable effect of the drug. And that is why we need to understand this pharmacokinetics, because what is the concentration of the drug that is attained in the body is what really determines the effect of the drug in an individual. So that is the importance. And we spoke about steady state concentration. So it is understood that to attain 94% steady state of the drug, so drug has to undergo 4 half-lives, and for a drug to attain 97% of the steady state, it has to undergo 5 half-lives. So which means to say drug undergoes multiple half-lives to attain certain steady state concentration, and to attain 94%, it has to undergo 4 half-lives. So I'll just show you an example of this, which typically we use in ICU is the morphine, which undergoes multiple half-life to attain certain steady concentration. I'll show you the graphical representation of it. So then we'll talk about protein binding. So for most drugs that are administered, it is the free drug which gets absorbed or which gets entered into the cell. So the one that gets to protein binding does not really attain the free concentration, and entry into the cells can be limited. So the antibiotics typically are albumin bound, and the amount of albumin really determines the binding of albumin to antibiotics, and this is directly proportional to the log of concentration of albumin. So there are certain drugs which do not bind to albumin, but they bind to another substitute called alpha-1 glycoprotein. So the drugs are lignocaine, pethidine, phenytoin, and propranolol. So these are some of the drugs which have binding to the alpha-1 glycoprotein. And this alpha-1 glycoprotein typically increases in critically ill patients. So for the listeners, just understand it is the free drug which freely moves into the cells, and antibiotics are predominantly bound to the albumin, and the amount of the albumin is what indicates the amount of binding that happens to an antibiotic. There are certain drugs which bind to alpha-1 glycoprotein, which typically increases in critically ill, and these are pethidine, phenytoin, and propranolol. And if albumin is less than 20 grams per liter, then it is shown that there can be increase in the free concentration of the drug, because you do not have albumin that can bind to the drug. So the free concentration of the drug increases. And the large changes in the protein binding is equal to small effect in the free concentration of the drug. So these are some of the aspects about the protein binding. So we'll talk about practical application. So why we have to understand all this whole concept of half-life, distribution half-life, elimination half-life, terminal half-life, volume of distribution, steady state volume. It is to have a clarity on appropriate dosing of the drug. So when a drug has limited toxicity, like typically penicillin, which may have limited toxicity, our understanding is large loading dose has to be given. So there are certain drugs which have narrow therapeutic index. So, and these are the typical drugs where a small loading dose has to be given. And there are certain drugs which attain total body clearance is high, where maintenance dose has to be used, which is typically with the use of aminophylline. So there are certain drugs which have long half-life, which I did mention previously, like morphine and midazolam. Elimination half-life is up to 3 hours. And for these drugs to attain new steady state, it takes 5 half-lives or 15 hours to attain new steady state. So I'll show an example in the next graph. So in critically ill patients, we need to understand the volume of distribution significantly increases. So when the volume of distribution increases, so the drug is distributed in a large volume, so the half-life of the drug almost doubles, but the total body concentration decreases. Because the volume of distribution is huge, the total body concentration gets halved. So this is an important aspect one need to understand. In critically ill, the volume of distribution increases, so the half-life of the drugs increases and the concentration of the drug decreases, which means the typical example is amiodarone. For amiodarone, the volume of distribution is large. So you can give fair amount of amiodarone in a repeated doses or as an infusion because the volume of distribution significantly increases. So this is one of the examples. So this is a beautiful graph. As you see for the morphine, if you are infusing at to maintain a steady state of 3 mg, there has to be a bolus of 10 mg given to attain that steady state concentration. So from 3 mg, if you have to increase to 4.5 mg per hour, just by cranking up to 4.5 mg, you wouldn't attain the steady state concentration of 4 points. So you need to give a bolus of 4 mg bolus and then increase it to 4.5 mg. And likewise, if your intent is to reduce it to 1.5 mg per hour, just reducing it from 3 to 1.5 doesn't drop the concentration to that. You may have to stop the infusion for 3 hours and then reduce to 1.5 milligram to attain that level. So this is something one needs to understand when you are using certain drugs like morphine with a very long half-life. And we'll talk about pharmacodynamics and biophase. So what do we understand by pharmacokinetics? We understood all the factors that influence the distribution of the drug and the elimination of the drug. Pharmacodynamics is trying to understand the effect of drug on the body. What is biophase? Biophase is the site of action of the drug. The study of site of action of drug is called biophase. So any drug, for it to act effectively, there has to be it is very much dependent on the blood flow. So when the blood flow is slow or there is a delayed blood flow in a low flow state, obviously the action of the drug also gets delayed. And these drugs, as we understand, it is dependent on the flow and it is dependent on the receptors on which this drug acts. So when there is a low flow state, so obviously there is the delayed action of the drug, and the receptor expression also sometimes can be affected because of the low flow state. So, and there are certain drugs which are freely distributed, and they're not dependent on protein binding, or they have a unique characteristics. The typical example is morphine and midazolam, which are eliminated from the brain by the efflux transporters, and they're not dependent on any other factors. But so that's why to maintain a very high levels of morphine in the brain may be difficult, except when the blood-brain barrier is breached. So the blood-brain barrier is an important aspect which determines this brain concentration of morphine. Otherwise, this morphine and midazolam get eliminated by the efflux transporters. See, like the example, some of the drugs depend on P-glycoprotein, like loperamide is an opioid, but when you take loperamide, it does not have a sedative effect because it is eliminated by the P-glycoprotein in the brain. So these are some of the things which determine the action of the drug in the body, and that's why we need to understand the pharmacodynamics. So the dose response, the effect of the drug is directly proportional to the log of concentration of the drug. So at certain stage, the small change in the drug can lead to large change in its effect. So which we call as therapeutic index, which is minimum toxic dose divided by maximum effective dose is what determines the therapeutic index. And there are certain drugs which have a low therapeutic index, which is aminoglycosides and aminophylines. So now we'll move to the effect of critical illness and what are the routes of administration of the drugs. So enteral route in critically ill patients is generally meant to be avoided. The reason is in critically ill patients, there is alteration in the pH of the gastric mucosa. There can be alteration in the gastric motility. There can be alteration in the function, gastric function, and there can be alteration in the blood flow to the GI system. So all these, and there can be delayed clearance of the drug. So all these alter the pharmacodynamics and pharmacokinetic characteristics of the drugs because of the alteration in the whole functional milieu of the GI system. And typically the drugs that get affected due to change in the GI system are antacids, anticholinergics, opioids, and phenothiazines. So how about intramuscular? So oral medications as much as possible in critically unwell acute situation are meant to be avoided because these are very much dependent on the gastric characteristics which tend to get affected. So intramuscularly, it is very unpredictable in critically ill. So when we are giving intravenous, there are certain drugs where you are not meant to use the glass syringes because they get absorbed into the glass syringe, like typically heparin, insulin, isosorbide. So these are some of the drugs that get absorbed into the glass syringes. And when you are using multiple infusions, certain times the compatibility of the drug may be an issue because some of these drugs like propylene glycol, calcium, thiopentone, they can cause precipitation within the tubes and they are not meant to be mixed with the other drugs because of the precipitation that happens. And another important aspect the listener should note is when we are using infusion pumps, when we are using a very low infusion at 0.5 ml or less than 1 to 2 ml, so the infusion also can become erratic. So more than 2 ml, they are fairly accurate. So once you keep coming down, like if you put an infusion pump at 0.5 ml or 0.8, so it may, the infusions can be quite inaccurate is what one needs to bear in mind. So we'll go into different failures or the organ failures that prevail in the critical care milieu. So in circulatory failure, so what are the PKPD changes that happen? So when there is a circulatory failure, there is higher concentration of the drug that happens predominantly in two organs. One is the heart and one is the brain. So there is increased flow of the blood or increased emphasis on the blood flow to these organs, the cardiac, heart, and the brain. So these are important organs. On the contrary, in circulatory failure, there is a reduction of renal blood flow and there is a reduction of hepatic blood flow. And reduction of hepatic blood flow can lead to impaired function in the liver, and reduction of in the renal blood flow can lead to drop in the glomerular filtration rate, and they can cause the repositioning, removement from the juxtacortical to the juxtamedullary structures. So in circulatory failure, there is more blood flow to the heart and the brain, and there is reduced blood flow to the kidney and to the liver, which affects the function, and there is reduced blood flow to the even the peripheries. So certain drugs that get affected in circulatory failure, the volume of distribution can come down, steady state concentration can come down, and total body clearance can come down. This can affect the drugs like sedatives and lignocaine. And there can be increase in the volume. The total blood volume can be, the total intravascular volume can increase, and that can lead to increase in the volume of distribution and increase in the distributive half-life. In acidosis, there can be peripheral resistance, and in shock, there can be increased sensitivity to the CNS depressants. So these are some of the changes that can affect the drugs. So at the end of it, the listener should understand that in circulatory shock, there is more blood flow to the central organs, which is the brain and the cardiac, and the blood flow to the liver and kidney gets compromised, and GFR comes down, and there is redistribution from the from the cortical to the juxtamedullary system, and there is increased sensitivity to the CNS depressant. So this is something, if you remember, that should be good enough. So how about in hepatic failure? In hepatic failure, the volume of distribution and total body clearance can either increase or decrease, and that can be increased in the elimination half-life. And the phase one, it affects the phase one, which are mediated by cytochrome P450. So, and it is shown in hepatic failure also, the impaired liver function may not have a great correlation. It has a poor correlation with the impaired metabolism of the drug. So what it only means is Just because there is a liver dysfunction, it doesn't necessarily always mean that the metabolism of drug is fully impaired. So when there is increased bilirubin, so it is shown that there is reduced binding of certain drugs to the albumin, like cephalosporins, penicillin, sulfonamides, and tetracyclines. There is reduced binding to the albumin. And in conditions where there is reduced hepatic blood flow, the drugs that are typically metabolism of these drugs are affected, mainly lignocaine, midazolam, and morphine. So in certain drugs which are predominantly excreted by the biliary tract like tigecycline, so there can be reduced clearance up to 55% and elimination half-life can increase up to 43%. So these are certain uh, certain disturbances that can happen in the liver and biliary system which can affect certain group of drugs. So that is what one needs to bear in mind. So any drugs that are metabolized, there is increased jaundice, so there is reduced binding of certain antibiotics to the albumin. So in critically ill, we said there can be increase in the alpha-1 GP. So this alpha-1 GP typically binds to drugs like erythromycin, trimethoprim, and lincosamide. So, and this can be reduced, and typically where there is increase in the volume of distribution or reduced clearance up to 60%. So how about in renal failure? In renal failure, volume of distribution increases, steady state volume increases, the half-life of the drug increases, and there is reduction in the total body clearance. So uremia reduces the binding of cephalosporins, penicillin, and sulfonamides to albumin. Like we saw, bilirubin also reduces the binding of cephalosporin, penicillin, sulfonamides, and tetracyclines. Uremia also reduces the binding to this albumin. And it is said creatinine clearance is a poor guide of the renal function. And glomerular filtration is what gets affected, and the glomerular filtration that gets affected influences the metabolism or excretion of aminoglycosides. So the aminoglycoside excretion is predominantly dependent on the glomerular filtration, and any situation where this is affected, so there is accumulation of these aminoglycosides. And drugs like morphine, they get metabolized into morphine 3 and morphine 6 glucuronide. And in presence of acute kidney injury or renal failure, they get accumulated and they fail to get eliminated, morphine 6 glucuronide. And renal replacement therapy alters the total body clearance of the drug. So that's about the renal failure. So let's move into sepsis and SIRS. In sepsis and SIRS, there is a lot of capillary leakage that happens, and there is increase in the volume of distribution. So in these situations, the loading dose of the drug has to be increased. But when the recovery of the patient happens from the sepsis, then your volume of distribution comes down. Then certain drugs where you may have increased the dose, these levels tend to go up. The vancomycin levels go up. But on the contrary, the doses of drugs like midazolam can reduce in patients where the recovery of the patients are happening and the volume of distribution comes down. So there, and one needs to understand there are certain receptors also which change in acute illness. So it has been shown that the catecholamine receptors, there will be upregulation when there is a reduction in the presence of the agonist. When there is downregulation of the receptors, when there is increase in the agonist. So which means when there are more catecholamines, there are downregulations, and there is less catecholamine, there is upregulation of these catecholamine receptors. And the critical illness, there can be proliferation of certain receptors like acetylcholine receptors. And it is shown there is reduced affinity of catecholamines when there is acidosis. So that's why you would see the vasopressors may not necessarily work well when there is severe acidosis. And there is reduced affinity of catecholamines in the presence of hypothermia also. So even temperature and pH has a bearing on how effectively these catecholamines act. Just briefly, we'll talk about augmented renal clearance. So this is a new concept. In critically ill patients, there is a enhanced creatinine clearance, which can lead to subtherapeutic concentration of the drug, which means you give the drug, it is rapidly eliminated. So there is a hyperdynamic state where there is GFR increases significantly and there is rapid elimination of the drug that happens. And this concept was elucidated in 2013 by Udi et al. So who looked at 71 patients, 43 were in sepsis group and 28 were in trauma group. And augmented renal clearance was present in 57.7% of these patients. And predominantly they were present in young trauma patients. 85.7% of these young trauma patients had augmented renal clearance, and predominantly they were males. That is something one need to. So the implications of this augmented renal clearance is, if you have a young trauma and you give a usual dose of antibiotics for a suspected infection, that may be inadequate, and we may be underdosing of these patients because these drugs are rapidly excreted in the setting of augmented renal clearance. So that is something one needs to bear. And these are some of the conditions where augmented renal clearance can happen: pancreatitis, burn, surgery, trauma, and sepsis. So now we'll talk about very briefly on antibiotics. So what does this whole PKPD mean to the antibiotics? So antibiotic typically depend on the maximum concentration. So after administration of single dose, the peak concentration that is attained determines the effectiveness of the drug. And there are certain antibiotics which are dependent on time, which means time dependent concentration, where the concentration should be more than minimum inhibitory concentration. And concentration dependency is Cmax divided by MIC is what determines the concentration, which is effective for maintaining its good efficacy. So in sepsis, we saw there is increase in the volume of distribution, and there is increase in the total body clearance also that can happen. So there was this study done in 2010 by Australian group by Robert et al., where they showed 70% of the antibiotics that are administered have inappropriate concentration in the patients in ICU. So here they emphasize on therapeutic drug monitoring as a way to achieve or attain appropriate concentration. 50.4% of the patients had increased concentration, and 23.7% had reduced concentration of the drug in ICU. So, and 19% of these patients had AKI. So this was another study by Belgian group where they have investigated the levels of ceftazidime, cefepime, and piptaz, and they found on day one, the PKPD targets of these drugs were achieved only in 28% for ceftazidime, 16% for cefepime, and 44% in piptaz, which means to say, because of so much of dynamic changes of pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics that happens in critically ill patients, so it is shown that all the antibiotics that we administer attain very inappropriate concentrations, maybe less than 50% in most cases, which means to say many a times we may be underdosing the drug. So that is what has been emphasized. So one thing, the one important reason for underdosing is obviously augmented renal clearance may be one of the reasons, or the volume of distribution may be so huge that the initial loading dose that you may give may be inadequate. That's why there is a lot more emphasis on giving a much bigger loading dose in a severely ill patient so that a good concentrations are attained, and then a steady state can be maintained. So this is the crux of what we could understand in critically unwell patients, so which we call it as a front-loaded dosing. So I would urge the listeners to, if you are interested in trying to understand the dosing, you can read this article which came, Antibiotic Dosing in Multi-Organ Dysfunction, which really elaborates on each and every drug, how it gets affected in critically ill patients. So it's quite a big document. As you see, it is around 10 pages. So it's a very enlightening article for anyone who may be interested in reading this. So for antibiotics, so for increased bactericidal effects, the emphasis has been on continuous infusion. And there are a lot of drug modification that needs to be done when patients are on renal replacement therapy. For vancomycin, nephrotoxicity is found to be at a levels of 20 to 30 micrograms per ml. And ototoxicity is found to be at a level of 22 to 100 micrograms per ml. And when anticoagulants are used in critically unwell, obviously we need to monitor APTT and make sure it is 1.5 to 3 times. And for aminophylline, when there is hypoxemia, it is shown that the total body clearance will reduce for aminophylline, and protein binding also gets reduced, and elimination half-life is around 8 to 9 hours for aminophylline. And metabolism of this drug is dependent on the age of the patient, gender, whether he's a smoker, or any other concomitant infections. So how about drug monitoring of sedatives? So for the toxic dose, aminophylline, it mainly depends on the peak concentration of the drug to manifest with the toxic effects. For aminoglycosides, it's the median concentration. So for the midazolam, the metabolite that gets accumulated is 1-hydroxymidazolam, 96% of it is protein bound. And for propofol, 98% is protein bound and half concentration is achieved in 10 minutes. The adverse effects of this is they can be increasing the triglycerides and it adds on to the calories. Thiopentone elimination of life is 17.5 hours, and thiopentone can have some effect on the neutrophils and it can impair its function. And when any of these sedatives are used, monitoring has to be with bispectral index and EEG. So what about opioids? Morphine is metabolized in the liver, and the morphine metabolites are morphine 3 glucuronide and morphine 6 glucuronide, which gets accumulated in the kidney. And in presence of acute kidney injury, these metabolites fail to get excreted, and elimination of life is 38 hours. Fentanyl, 86% is protein bound, and elimination of life is 6 hours. So in muscle relaxants, vecuronium, the metabolite is 3-deacetyl vecuronium. Elimination of life is 116 minutes. For antiarrhythmics like lignocaine, which are typically used in presence of heart failure, these drugs can get accumulated in heart failure where there is a reduction in the steady state volume or reduction in the total body clearance. And this is a situation where there can be increase in the alpha-1 GP, which tends to accumulate this drug. So digoxin toxicity gets more pronounced in the setting of hypokalemia, hypocalcemia, and hypomagnesemia. So we'll just talk about in brief. So when the loading dose, you have to determine the loading dose. So you need to see if the volume of distribution is huge in the body, then you have to increase the drug dose. If the volume of distribution is less, then you have to reduce the drug dose. So this is in brief as to how we approach the dosing of the drug. And with regards to maintenance dose, you need to look at the metabolism, which predominantly happens in the liver. So when there is increased metabolism, so the drug dose has to be increased. When there is reduced metabolism, you would reduce the drug dose. And when it comes to excretion, you would see whether the excretion of the drug is happening by the kidney or by the liver. If there is reduced excretion because of acute kidney injury, you would reduce the drug dose, increase the dosing interval, or combine both. When there is increased excretion of the drugs like augmented renal clearance, you would increase the drug dose, reduce the dosing interval, or combine both. So this is in brief the algorithm how you could approach the dosing of the drug based on the loading dose and the metabolism and the excretion of the drug. And loading is predominantly dependent on the volume of distribution. So the summary and take home, I'm sure many of you would have felt quite overwhelming with all the terminologies that I've used, and the whole nature of the topic is such that you have to read multiple times to understand this concept of volume of distribution and half-life, distribution half-life, elimination of life, and one needs to understand the total body clearance, because these are the variables which has a bearing on the dosing of the drug and the effective concentration of the drug that needs to be attained with appropriate dosing. So summary and take-home message is IV drug is preferred in critically ill. Most drugs have narrow therapeutic index. So when there is a narrow therapeutic index, obviously your loading dose has to be done with a caution. So if drug has a wide therapeutic index or is it a safe drug, then you can give a big loading dose. So that's what it means. And critically ill patients, as we saw, have very altered pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics. And these pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics are very different when you are dealing with the circulatory failure. It is very different when you are dealing with the renal failure. It is very different when you are dealing with the respiratory, with the liver failure. And it is very different in sepsis, septic shock, or SIRS. So that is something we understood. And response to drug in critically ill changes very quickly, because as I said, in the initial phase of acutely ill patients, the volume of distribution may be huge, the larger doses may be used. But in the recovery phase, the volume of distribution comes down, where you may have to reduce the drug dosing of certain drugs. Otherwise, the toxicity profile of those drugs can increase. So it is a very dynamic process. In critically ill, we cannot say, okay, the volume of distribution is huge, I'll continue with this dosage. So the whole situation is dynamic, and the dosing of the drugs also have to change as per the evolution of the disease. As you saw in sepsis, most of the antibiotics that we dose seem to be underdosed because of the huge volume of distribution in these patients. So it is very important that emphasis has to be given on a big loading dose. So that is the crux of this whole talk on dosing. and it is extremely important to monitor the effect of the drug regularly. So which means to say, as the situation evolves, as the progression of the disease is happening, so one need to keep monitoring how is the effect of the drug being manifested. And in patients with hemodialysis or plasmapheresis and now with ECMO, all these have a bearing on altering the drug levels and the drug effect. So thank you very much. So I will end with this beautiful quote. So don't be impressed by money, followers, degrees, and titles. Be impressed by kindness, integrity, humility, and generosity. Thank you all. So it is a very dry topic. I should confess, you may not have understood each and everything that I may have uttered. So I would request you to rehear to this lecture 2-3 times. And the reference for this is, I would request the listeners to read this topic in OS manual. So it is very nicely given, very nicely elaborated, and you would take at least a week to assimilate all the contents in that chapter in OS manual. And you can, the easiest way is to visit my website www.drpradeeprangappa.com to rehear to this lecture to gain clarity and insights. Thank you all.